Welcome to the channel, and in this video I'll be going over my John Carpenter collection. He's my favorite all-time director, so I wanted to showcase his filmography on my channel. Well, most of his films. I don't have every single one, but I have the majority. I'll be going in chronological order. I hope you enjoy. First up is from 1976, Assault on Precinct 13, which is Carpenter's second movie and a vast improvement over his first film, Dark Star. This release was put out in 2013 by Scream Factory. I picked this up a few years later, and I was lucky enough to get it with the slipcover. It does come with reversible artwork featuring the original poster art. It's a great action movie made even better with an awesome score. I actually got to see this in theaters last year at an Alamo Drafthouse. I haven't been to one before, and it was actually a pretty cool experience. Anyway, you can get this release for pretty cheap at the moment. It hovers around 15 bucks. There's still no word on a 4K, but I'm sure it's imminent. I also own Assault on Precinct 13 on UMD to watch on my PSP. It was put out by some company called Image Entertainment. I liked how they included a quote from Leonard Maltin, although I think it is a 4-star movie, not a 3.5. It might be a little hard to find nowadays, but when they pop up on eBay, they're usually pretty affordable. Also, I like how they included some interior artwork. That was a nice touch. Next is 1978's Halloween. I bought this 10-disc set of the entire series about 10 years ago, and it wouldn't be long after that it would go out of print. So then in 2020, Best Buy put out this 4K Steelbook. It's a cool looking Steelbook, and I like that they went with fall colors for it. And it would only be a year later that this would get another 4K release from Scream Factory. Maybe someday I'll part with this, but I don't think I'm alone when it comes to owning a bunch of releases for this film. So a year later, after Lionsgate put out their 4K of Halloween, Scream Factory would put out their own edition of the film, along with a few of the sequels. I remember there being distribution problems, and particularly the sequels. They weren't widely available at the time of release. I was able to get this at Best Buy, and eventually I did get all the sequels. They didn't add any new special features, but what other new information does anyone really have to add to this movie? The prior release that Scream Factory put out was already pretty loaded with special features, but the new 4K restoration is the main reason to buy this. The last edition of Halloween that I own is the UMD. It was put out by Anchor Bay, and it's a little hard to come by nowadays. Not many classic slashers were released on this format, unfortunately, but I'm pretty stoked to have this in my collection. Next is 1980's The Fog. This was also put out by Scream Factory back in 2013. Scream Factory has put out the majority of Carpenter's filmography, so you're going to hear them get brought up a lot in this video. This is a great release for a great movie, and they filmed a new interview with Jamie Lee Curtis. It's a little bit of a career retrospective, especially going over the horror films she starred in. Also, Justin Osborne killed it with the artwork on this release. Next is from 1981, Escape from New York. Scream Factory once again put this out. It's another great release, and Paul Shipper did a great job with the new artwork on the slipcover. This movie is a classic. Snake Plissken is an iconic character and is among the best action heroes, although I'm sure Snake wouldn't see himself as a hero. It's got a great score, great cast, and a great premise. It's for sure one of Carpenter's best films. I also have Escape from New York on UMD. This was put out by MGM back in the day, and it's one of my go-to movies to bring with me on any trip. Also, I like that they included the original poster artwork on the inside. Next is probably widely considered Carpenter's best film, with 1982's The Thing. It's definitely considered a masterpiece now, but back then, critics shit all over this film.
And I would call this the barf bag movie of July. I have some problems with it.
And the movie was a bit of a box office disappointment. Scream Factory put this out back in 2016. They ported over all of the previous bonus features, as well as filmed some new interviews for this. Universal put this out on 4K a couple years ago, but I would say that this is still the definitive release for this film, for the amount of bonus features you get with this edition alone. Carpenter followed up The Thing with the adaptation of Stephen King's Christine. Surprisingly, this hasn't been released by Scream Factory. Instead, Sony has put it out themselves. I wish this had some sort of collector's edition, but Sony did put out a cool steelbook, so there's that. At least it's not a bare bones release, and it ports over the special features that were done for the DVD. Sony would also put this out on 4K, but I'm hoping this gets the collector's edition treatment one day. Next is 1984's Starman, and it probably is Carpenter's most underappreciated film. Scream Factory put out this collector's edition in 2018. It stands out from Carpenter's filmography because it's not a horror film or an action film. It's a sci-fi adventure film where Jeff Bridges plays an alien and takes the form of Karen Allen's recently deceased husband, and they have to travel across the country to get Bridges back to his mothership. Jeff Bridges was actually nominated for an Oscar, which might be the only Oscar nom a Carpenter film has ever gotten. Both Jeff Bridges and Carpenter were interviewed for this release. I'm hoping I've sold you on it because more people need to check out this film. I also own a sealed VHS copy of the film that I bought at Viper Video in Tampa a few years back, and for $3.99, how could I pass this up? I haven't bought many VHS over the years. I'm trying to avoid starting another collection, even though last time I was there I ended up buying Billy Zane's The Phantom. Next is what I would consider Carpenter's most fun film, 1986's Big Trouble in Little China. It's a swashbuckling martial arts buddy action fantasy film. It blends a few different genres, and it does so in an amazing way, and at the forefront is Jack Burton, another amazing character played by Kurt Russell. Scream Factory put out this collector's edition in 2019. I love the new artwork, but nothing will ever beat that original poster done by Drew Struzan. They got a bunch of new interviews for this release, but sadly they didn't get Carpenter or Russell. I don't know how much longer this will be available since this is a Fox movie, and this was put out before Disney bought Fox. So definitely get this before Disney stores it in their stupid fucking vault. Fox put this out on UMD for the PSP, and this is also another movie that I usually tend to bring with me on trips. I mean, what a better way to kill time on a flight than watching this Kurt Russell classic. It also comes with a commentary and a couple bonus features as well. Next, Carpenter returned to horror with 1987's Prince of Darkness. And the first time I watched it, I kinda liked it, but with each subsequent viewing, I've grown to really like this movie. It's the second film in his Apocalypse trilogy, the first being The Thing. I don't know if Carpenter deliberately came up with the Apocalypse trilogy, or that was just a term coined by horror fans. The movie does feature Alice Cooper in his second best acting role, the first obviously being Wayne's World. Scream Factory put this out in 2015, featuring new artwork by Justin Osborne. They also got new interviews with Carpenter and Alice Cooper, so definitely check out this Blu-ray or the new 4K that came out recently. Next is another classic, 1988's They Live, starring the late great Roddy Piper, and it still remains the best movie starring a professional wrestler. Sorry, Dwayne. This is a sci-fi action film that satirizes the political climate of the 1980s, and it still remains relevant to this day. Even if you haven't seen this movie, you might be aware of it since it inspired the clothing brand Obey. This collector's edition was put out by Scream Factory back in 2012, and it has some badass artwork, but the original poster is also pretty iconic to me. Scream Factory also put this out on 4K as well. I can't recommend this movie enough. Next is the horror anthology Body Bags that aired on Showtime back in 1993. This was originally going to be a Tales from the Crypt-esque show, but Showtime decided to pull the plug on that, and so we essentially just got a TV movie instead. A pretty good one though. Carpenter plays the Crypt Keeper-like role as the coroner who introduces each story in this anthology. Two of the stories were directed by Carpenter, and the other being directed by Tobe Hooper. This release was put out by Scream Factory back in 2013, and I really dig the new artwork by Justin Osborne. If you like horror anthologies like Creepshow, Trick or Treat, or the VHS movies, then I highly recommend checking this out. After Body Bags, Carpenter then went on to direct In the Mouth of Madness, a movie that is definitely inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and the third movie in his Apocalypse trilogy. It is also hands down the best Carpenter movie made in the 90s. Scream Factory put out this collector's edition back in 2018 with some pretty good artwork by Joel Robinson. It comes with a new commentary from Carpenter and a new interview with special effects artist Greg Nicotero. I wish they had gotten a new interview with Sam Neill. There's no 4K release, but I'm sure that'll get announced in the near future. Next is the 1995 remake of The Village of the Damned. I haven't seen the 1960s original, but I actually do enjoy this movie. It's definitely one of his weaker films. The kids aren't all that creepy, but at least it's held together by a pretty strong cast. Both Superman and Luke Skywalker are in this movie, but it's sadly the last film Christopher Reeve made before his unfortunate accident. This is the only film outside of his Superman movies that I've seen him in, and it's certainly better than Superman 3 and 4. Scream Factory put this out in 2016, and I like the new artwork by Nathan Milliner. Scream Factory has a new 4K on the way, and they actually got some new interviews for it, so I'll probably end up double dipping on this one day. Next is the only sequel that Carpenter ever directed, 1996's Escape from LA, and it pales in comparison to Escape from New York. It has this weird tonal shift, and it's so much more goofier than the first one. I mean, all you gotta do is watch the surfing scene to know what kind of movie you're in for. I actually recently learned that Tony Hawk was the stunt double for Peter Fonda in that scene, which is pretty funny. This was put out by Scream Factory back in 2020. They got a few new interviews for this release, and one of them being with Bruce Campbell. It's only an audio interview since it was back during the pandemic. Hugh Fleming did a great job with the new artwork for this release. Paramount did put this out on 4K a few years ago, but I'm good with this edition. Next is the 1998 action western Vampires. This is a pretty fun vampire flick starring James Woods, who's definitely an unconventional choice for an action star, but it works for this movie. You can also tell that he was allowed to improvise and really make the character of Jack Crow his own. Pretty solid character name. Scream Factory put this out in 2019 and got a new interview with James Woods, which he confirms he was able to ad-lib on set. They also got a new interview with Carpenter as well. Devin Whitehead did the art, and I've liked pretty much all of his artwork he's done for Scream Factory. Definitely a cool addition to have in my collection. I also own Vampires on UMD. The first time I watched this movie was actually on my PSP. The previous Blu-ray was out of print, and this UMD was pretty cheap at a local video game store. This was put out by Sony way back when, and it has nice interior artwork. I definitely recommend checking this movie out if you're looking for a fun vampire flick. Lastly, I have John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars. This was put out by Mill Creek back in 2019, and this movie is similar to Escape from LA, where the only way to enjoy it is if you just accept it as a silly action movie, but even I gotta admit, it's hard to do that with this movie. This release, I believe, is no longer in print, so I wouldn't be surprised if Scream Factory put out their own edition of this film, and I'll just have to end up double dipping on this movie, which I do have some nostalgia for. Before I wrap up the video, I want to just go over the movies of Carpenter's that I don't own. His first film, Dark Star, his 2 TV movies, Somebody's Watching Me and Elvis, then the Chevy Chase comedy, Memoirs of an Invisible Man, and then The Ward, which is his last and presumably his final film. Thank you for watching. I'll try to do more videos like this where I go over a filmmaker's filmography. If you have any suggestions, leave a comment down below. And as always, have a movie time.
Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.